This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. So before this video starts, this is Q from the future coming at you. A couple of things have dropped. Arik Armstead has signed somewhere, and so did DJ Reader. He signed with the Detroit Lions. So this video was recorded well before that news dropped. Also, the Browns officially brought in Devon Bush. As far as what I think about those moves or what I think about the Devon Bush signing, I kind of covered that in this video where I'm talking about Devon Bush being on a visit. My thoughts really haven't changed since the Browns signed him, but just wanted to let you guys know that. Now, enjoy the video. And this video is going to be covering pretty much everything that's going on about the Browns free agency as of noon Eastern on Thursday, March 14th. We'll see if more things come in after that. I'll try to get videos out as soon as possible. The latest news when it comes to the Browns free agency, and I'll go through it. They're bringing Devon Bush on a visit. Devon Bush is a former linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This makes some sense for the Cleveland Browns. I believe they had him do a visit last year. They were interested in bringing him in. But Devon Bush was somebody that they were interested in last year. It never really came to fruition. I believe he signed with the Seattle Seahawks. And that was that. It's not really a surprise to see the Browns circle back and go after him. Andrew Berry has a bit of a pattern, right? He does not give up on his own draft picks. And just because he didn't get the opportunity to draft you, if he liked you in a draft class, he's not going to be so fast to throw the idea of that prospect playing for the Browns away. We see this with Elijah Moore, somebody he liked in a draft class, didn't get to draft them, came back around, traded for him. We see this with Jeudy. We see this with a bunch of guys on the roster. Pierre Strong, if he likes a prospect, he trusts that, and he's willing to go after guys who might not have had the production at other places, but maybe he has a vision for them that can be utilized by his staff and his team. So that is the Devon Bush thing. That makes 100% sense given what how Andrew Berry likes to go about things. The Browns also signed Quentin Jefferson. I think this is a solid signing. I think Quentin Jefferson is a depth piece at defensive tackle. I think that, you know, unless they sign like a DJ Reader or an Arik Armstead, which I do think is still on the table because I don't think Quentin Jefferson is anybody that takes anything off the table. I think he's more in that vein of Shelby Harris, more so in like where Maurice Hurst was last year, where it's kind of a flyer. But I don't think that Quentin Jefferson means that you're not going to look for another starting defensive tackle. So you get Quentin Jefferson. That's a good depth piece for the Cleveland Browns. I also don't think that need at defensive tackle too is as glaring as people make it seem like you already have Dalvin Tomlinson, you already have Zadarius Smith, and you have Myles Garrett. Would it be nice to have another big name there at defensive tackle? Sure. Look, here's the thing with Browns free agency this year. A lot of the things that people are going to fixate on or focus on just aren't as important as people make it out to be. I hear a lot of people complaining about backup running back. Okay. It's just what they don't really have that many holes on the roster that they could have filled in free agency. And that leads to what you need to pick up. Just, yeah, if you get it, cool. If you don't, fine. And there's always the draft to solve these problems. Like if you're not satisfied with Jed Wills, you want a better solution behind him. That was never going to happen in free agency. That was something that was always going to happen in the draft. if you want a better backup running back. That could have happened in free agency. The prices were a little high for running backs for the Browns, I think. And I think that's why you'll see them more likely to sign somebody, or not sign somebody, to draft somebody in this year's draft. So you don't have to have all of your answers. You don't have to have all of the questions of a roster answered, period. Like, there's this expectation that a football team should put together a roster with no questions. Every football team has questions on their roster. Look at who was in the Super Bowl. The San Francisco 49ers got questions on their roster. The Kansas City Chiefs had millions of questions on their roster. Even Baltimore, who was the 1 seed this year, look at their wide receiver room, got questions on that roster, right? Like, you're not going to build a perfect roster when you have a salary cap, and the expectation that you must build a roster with no questions, even at backup running back, I do think is a bit ridiculous. But let's get back to the free agency conversation. So Quentin Jefferson, I think that's a depth piece. They signed Tony Brown too. That's a special teamer, right? Bubba Ventrone, nothing really big there, kind of just replacing what Mike Ford did for the team last year. Hopefully we don't have to see him play corner, but you never hope that your special team aces have to play corner. They also signed Giovanni Ricci from the Carolina Panthers. This is an H-back / fullback type player. I like him enough. He's going to play maybe 5 snaps a game. I don't think that's too important there. Would Devon Bush be a downgrade from Sione Takitaki? That's not what they're asking Devon Bush to do, though, right? Like, they're not asking Devon Bush to be Sione Takitaki. They're going to ask more out of JOK. They already signed Jordan Hicks, who is more the Sione Takitaki replacement. And Devon Bush is like replacing Jacob Phillips. Like, they're not asking Devon Bush to start day one. Like, if he does, he does. But that's more of a benefit. This is more of a depth piece, guys. Like, again, every piece that they sign, they're not signing to start or have a big role on the team. And I think that's the case with Devon. I think that's the case with Quentin Jefferson. I think that's the case with Tony Brown and Giovanni Ricci. Like, these guys aren't in Hakeem Adeniji too. These guys, they're not signing to be like a big impactful part of the team. They're just depth pieces there. Same thing with Nyheim Hines, who is going to be a 3rd string running back, more than likely a 3rd or 4th string running back, and a return specialist. We'll see if he returns kicks and punts. They still could go after James Prochet if they wanted him to return punts. Again, we'll see what happens there. But Nyheim Hines, a lot of guys brought over from Bubba Ventrone's last stop at Indy for the special teams. And then they signed Jordan Hicks, who, again, we kind of talked about this, kind of being a replacement for Awalk and Takitaki, given that Awalk and Takitaki had similar roles where they were will linebackers, but also the backup Mike when JOK kind of took over those responsibilities. Jordan Hicks is a solid veteran, tons of tackles throughout his career, kind of a dirty work type of guy, veteran player. And I think he's going to fill a backup role for this team, kind of fill what you were asking Awalk to do. That makes a ton of sense to me. So that's where the Browns are with their recent free agency news. Let's talk about who they lost, right? The Browns lost Sione Takitaki to New England. And I think of all the players that they've lost, probably the biggest and most impactful one is Sione Takitaki. Like, he was actually a good player. It actually hurt to lose Sione Takitaki. You understood why they didn't go out and re-sign him because it just didn't make that much sense anymore. You're going to emphasize JOK. You already signed Jordan Hicks. You're probably going to draft a linebacker. You drafted, well, not drafted, but you signed Muhammad Diabite last year. You played Tony Fields a lot. You got some young linebackers that you can give more time to. Hell, maybe you even want to give Jacob Phillips more time. Like we said at the beginning, it's not like Andrew Berry likes to give up on his draft picks. So I think he'll give Jacob Phillips even opportunity to succeed. And then that's when we start talking about Devon Bush potentially being in that role if he signs with the Cleveland Browns, and other guys being there. So it hurts to not have Taki, and that's probably the biggest loss that you had. But that says more about how little the Browns are losing in this free agency period than anything about Taki, no disrespect to him. I like Taki, but if Taki's the most impactful player you're losing on your roster, you're in a good spot, especially if you felt good about that roster in the previous year. And we should feel good about this Cleveland Browns roster. I mean, this is a team that had 26% of their roster on salary cap. I mean, this is a team that had 26% of their salary cap on injured reserve. And they still found a way to win 11-6. They still found a way to beat some of the best teams in the NFL. They still found a way to make the playoffs. And look, they didn't look good in that playoff game, but the fact that they made it is a victory in itself, a massive victory in itself. We look back at the data, 10 years, teams that have gotten over 26% of the salary cap on IR, none of them made the playoffs, except for the Cleveland Browns. Hell, one team was over 500. So to overcome that amount of injuries and to be over 500 is a victory. To make the playoffs is a serious feat to that roster. So just getting that 26% of the salary cap back healthy is a huge deal for this team, let alone adding things on top of it. Other than Sione Taki, Cleveland Browns lost Nick Harris to Seattle. I mean, like, we all saw this coming. We knew Nick Harris wasn't going to be the backup center anymore. They drafted Luke Whippler. He carved out a role for himself as a fullback, but they signed a fullback, so now Nick Harris has really no purpose here. Hope the best for him in Seattle, because I do think that Nick Harris can start for a football team. He just wasn't going to start for the Cleveland Browns, as he was behind Ethan Posick and Luke Whippler when it comes to playing at center. Jordan Elliott was one of the surprises. I think he got paid the most out of any of the guys that left the Cleveland Browns. Like, maybe Joe Flacco got paid more, but he got 10 over 2, so $5 million a year for Jordan Elliott. Hey, I'm just happy Jordan got paid, because we know that it's been a journey for Jordan Elliott. He has not had the best run in Cleveland, and he had a solid year this year, but also this year kind of kept him out of being out of the league. I'm shocked that that was enough to get him a 2-year, $5 million, like $10 million deal. Really shocked that, like, the 49ers of all teams paid him $10 million over 2. That's incredible. That's incredible for Jordan Elliott. Did not expect that. The Harrison Bryant signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. Good luck to Harrison. Mike Ford signed with the Houston Texans. Anthony Walker is with Miami now. Makes sense. And then Joe Flacco is in Indianapolis as a backup behind Anthony Richardson, which is interesting, right? Because Joe Flacco and Shane Steichen, I don't think a lot of us had that combination on our bingo cards in 2024 at all. Now, with Joe Flacco being gone, that brings us to the next signing that the Browns had, and I think this is one of the most talked about signings. I'll try not to talk about it that much because I feel like it's been talked to death by the end of this week. The whole Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston thing. Here's what I'll say. Here's my final say on it. I understand why people wanted the Browns to bring back Joe Flacco. He had some success last year, right? Specifically like the last 3 games of the regular season that he played in. I thought he was better than you can expect a backup to be, which is exactly where you want a backup quarterback to be. And I get that people from the outside looking in see Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, and think, oh man, that's a huge difference. But I will put this out there. One, Jameis Winston has put together multiple stretches of good quarterback play as a backup quarterback when asked to start. So he is as qualified as anybody to be backup quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. 2, when you look at how the Browns offense, the direction that they're moving away from the Kubiak stuff, and they're moving more into what Ken Dorsey likes to do, what other teams like to do, what Deshaun Watson like a modern offense, a more modern offense than what they had before. Not to say that Kevin was running a dinosaur last year, but it was something that Joe Flacco was super familiar with. You're moving away from that, which means the more you move away from that kind of offense, the less it makes sense to keep Joe Flacco as your backup. Now, is there baggage with how fans are going to react to Joe Flacco versus Deshaun Watson? Sure. Like, were fans going to root for Joe Flacco? Were some fans, not all fans, but some fans going to root for Joe Flacco? Yeah. There were always going to be those fans who are going to be never Watsoners, and they're just going to root against Watson as long as he's here for multiple reasons. But those fans, they're not going to not root for somebody that's not Deshaun Watson. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Joe Flacco was their guy. That was who they're going to champion. But it can easily be Jameis Winston or DTR. Like, those fans who don't want to cheer for Deshaun Watson are not going to cheer for Deshaun Watson, regardless of who the backup is. So I think that whole element of it was overblown because I saw this fan base chant for DTR after like 2 good preseason games last year. They was going to do this, right? Like, whether it was Joe Flacco or not, the pressure that people were alluding to of bringing back Joe Flacco was going to be there. So I don't think they did this to avoid that. I think Andrew Berry understands that whole element of that, and he knows who he traded for and what the public reputation of who he traded for is. And there's just some battles you're not going to win. And that's one of them, right? There's always in any NFL team, unless you got Pat Mahomes, a contingency of fans that want to root for the backup anyways. In this situation, it's magnified, multiplied, and on fire, right? So, yeah, of course, there's going to be a contingency of fans that want to cheer for the backup, but they're going to cheer for the backup no matter what. I don't think that's what went into this decision. I think it was about where this team is going on a on-field direction, and they're moving away from what Joe Flacco succeeded in last year. Why would they bring back Joe Flacco? It doesn't make much sense, right? Jameis Winston made a lot more sense because he kind of plays in the way that they're going to need a quarterback to play for this offense to work in the ways that they're trying to move it forward into what other teams are doing. I get that people don't want to have a football conversation about the backup quarterback, but like that was determined by football, in my opinion. So Joe Flacco is gone to Indy. Interesting to see him with Shane Steichen. Anthony Richardson looked really good there too, by the way. It's something to watch because we all know about CJ Stroud lighting the league on fire. Anthony Richardson looked better than CJ Stroud did early in the season when he was healthy, but obviously he got hurt. We didn't see much of him. So really excited to see what Anthony Richardson does in year 2. But yeah, that's the whole Joe Flacco thing. And then that kind of leans into Jameis. I think some of the re-signings here are a big deal for the Cleveland Browns. They brought back Michael Dunn, underrated guy to have on the team. I mean, he's played left tackle, right tackle. He's played both guard positions. And hell, in the pinch, he could play center. He's like an ultimate utility offensive lineman that you could throw out there. He's a really good backup guard. So if Wyatt goes down, you can throw him in there. If Joe has to go down, you can feel fine about having Michael Dunn in there. Real good piece to have, right? Real good utility piece to have. I think that was a little underrated. Corey Bojorquez, who's coming off of what I feel like had to be one of his best years as a punter in the NFL, is back with the Cleveland Browns. So that's good to see. It's also nice to see the stigma that some fans had about Corey Bojorquez as a holder die this year, as he did an excellent job holding the football for Dustin Hopkins. We all knew, well, most of us knew that Cade York's issues weren't about the holds. It was honestly like a last grasp, desperate excuse for people who really wanted the Cade York thing to work. And they kind of threw Corey Bojorquez under the bus to make it happen. Corey Bojorquez held the ball fine, apparently, because Dustin Hopkins had no problem making those kicks this year. Had a career best year, so kind of kills that whole Corey Bojorquez can't hold kicks theory. And good on him. Good season for him, punting the ball well. All of this stuff, love it. Shelby Harris, low-key, kind of a big deal that they brought him back. He's a great depth piece. I think he's a great veteran to have around some of these young guys. If you have a situation where you might draft another young defensive tackle, he's a great veteran to have in the room. And I just like the energy that he brings to the game, into the locker room for most of the year. Mo Hurst re-signed. Thought that was pivotal. Really did a great job rushing the passer from that defensive tackle position. When he's healthy, he's productive. The question is his health. Hopefully, after this pec injury, he can get back to being healthy and play a full season with the Cleveland Browns, because he was a difference maker on this team when he was healthy, and I think he can continue to be a difference maker on this team if he can stay healthy. Now, as far as defensive tackle goes, I think there's a number of routes that they could go about this. They could go with more value guys like Quentin Jefferson, maybe like Larry Ogunjobi, bringing him back or something like that. They can go with a DJ Reader. I think the Browns are going to wait this market out. I think they're going to get another defensive tackle. I really do, but I think they're going to wait this out. When I say wait this out, this might happen after the draft. This might happen right before training camp. Like, they might wait a while for the prices to get to where they want to on a defensive tackle before they go. There's going to be defensive tackles that we know available in that period. There always are. And I think the Browns are going to be in that market to go after one of those defensive tackles. Same way they went after Shelby Harris. Same way they got Zadarius Smith late. I really want to be surprised if the Browns, maybe they pump the brakes on some of the free agency signings. Maybe they don't sign anybody to a big deal right now because the money is not right, and they give this a few months. They give this time to draft guys, really fill out their roster, see where they're at, and then they go out and attack defensive tackle. So I think for the time being, now that I said this, Andrew Berry going to sign somebody, but for the time being, I think the Browns are kind of in wait and see mode, which means they're probably going to chill out on signing free agents until after the draft. I think that's where they're probably leaning, unless like a deal comes in front of them that they can't not sign. So that's Mo Hurst, Shelby Harris. We already talked about Jameis Winston. Let's talk about the Jerry Jeudy trade. I thought this was a good trade. You only gave up a 5th and 6. Ironically, the Baker Mayfield 5th. Well, the Baker Mayfield 6. Yeah, the Baker Mayfield 5th, the Deshaun Watson 6. This is a move to get younger at wide receiver. This is also like one of those Andrew Berry, we're going to take a guy that we liked in the draft. We're going to see if we can do something better with him. And if it does work, right, if you do get like the most out of Jerry Jeudy and he's a really productive player, he's the exact same archetype as Amari Cooper, which means not only are they interchangeable if you play them on the field at the same time, But also, you can replace Amari Cooper with Jerry Jeudy if Jerry Jeudy plays really well. If Jerry Jeudy does not play well, he'll be a slot receiver. He'll be productive enough. He'll hopefully get 500 to 800 yards, and you'll call it a day after that year of the contract. So really no risk for the Cleveland Browns in bringing in Jerry Jeudy. Thought that made a ton of sense for Cleveland to do, especially at that price. And you got to remember, $12 million for a wide receiver is dirt cheap because Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I think that cost people like, what, 22? For Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 22. Wide receivers are super expensive. That's why I think the team really wanted to stay away from the free agency market when it comes to wide receivers. And let's be honest here, a lot of teams are staying away from that free agent. That free agency market for wide receivers is usually garbage. And it's usually garbage. Like, you don't usually see teams sign a new wide receiver and that wide receiver work out exactly how they want it to. You see guys like Calvin Ridley, who people were pretty questionable on, even with his body of work last year, getting tons of money. That wide receiver market is always overinflated because guys who get traded for or guys who get extended get these big deals. But the guys who hit the open market, they usually hit it for a reason because teams right now, wide receiver is at a premium, and if there's a good wide receiver, they will be willing to keep it. So $12 million for Jerry Jeudy, and you trade for a wide receiver. We've seen trades for wide receiver be successful. We've seen drafting for wide receivers be successful. What we have not seen have a ton of success so far in the last couple of years in free agency is free agent wide receivers. So that is an interesting trend to watch, but I think that's also why they decided to not go after one of those free agent wide receivers, even like a Mike Williams who might hit the market. Zadarius Smith re-signed with the Browns at about $12 million. I think that was a pretty big deal. It basically means you're running back one of the best defensive lines in football. You're maybe adding a couple pieces around that, and you're hoping a second year in Jim Schwartz's system makes them an even better defensive line going forward. All in all, when I look at what the Browns have done so far in free agency, they haven't done the big splash. Like Jerry Jeudy, I guess that counts as a little bit of a splash, right? He's not like a number one receiver. He's probably going to play the slot, but he is not no deal, right? Like, that is a big deal that they brought in another wide receiver. Other than that, it's been moves to tighten the screws. Okay, we're going to put JOK at Mike. What do we need to tighten the screws at that? Okay, we're going to get Jordan Hicks, and maybe we bring in Devon Bush. Maybe we bring in all these other guys. We want to make sure that we have the same defensive line that we had last year. Let's bring back all of those guys for year 2. Let's bring back some depth pieces. Let's sign some special teams guys. I think the Browns made a ton of moves here to just get better around the edges. But remember, they were never going to sign anybody in free agency that they hope to have more impact than Nick Chubb coming back off of injury or Deshaun Watson coming back off of injury. Those are the two guys that they expect to be healthy for 2024, that they expect to be the big changes. I know a lot of people are saying, hey, the rest of the AFC got better and the Browns didn't really change much. Well, one, it's real easy to get carried away with how much better a team got in March. We've seen this happen with the Cleveland Browns, where we were predicting Super Bowl after we traded for Odell Beckham. Team ended up going 6-10. So what looks good in March ain't necessarily what's going to look good in January. It's always something to remember. And 2, this Browns team was really good last year with a ton of injuries. If they were healthy at the end of the season, we would have had very different discussions about their potential to win a Super Bowl. But since they weren't, We didn't have those conversations. They didn't beat Houston, but they're going to get healthier this offseason. And that's the biggest thing for this team. It was never going to be about who they're going to bring in free agency. It was always going to be about this roster, which sits at one of the best in the NFL, getting healthy. But that's my thoughts on the Browns free agency. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, in the chat, wherever you're seeing this down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.